just do it! Don't let your dreams be dreams. Yesterday, you said tomorrow, so just do it! Make your dreams come true! Just do it!
Welcome to Successful Dropout. This podcast is for the outliers, the innovators, the rebels, those that dare to dream and act on their dreams. I'm your host, Kylan Ginger. Join me as we find out what it takes to drop out, grind, and succeed. How's it going, everybody? I've got some pretty exciting news. If you listen to the podcast much, you know we've been building a pretty vibrant community of truly extraordinary people who have committed to an unconventional route through life. The Successful Dropout audience has been growing a lot, and I get a lot of people reaching out to me now with all sorts of questions regarding education, dropping out, opting out, entrepreneurship, resources, networking, etc. So much so that I decided it was time to create a more accessible community on Facebook so that we can all ask and answer these kinds of questions together, as well as celebrate our successes and encourage each other during inevitable adversity. So I've created a closed Facebook group, and I want to invite you to join it. If you follow Successful Dropout, if you resonate with our philosophy and want to help me grow this thriving community, go to successfuldropout.com/group. This community is for the rebels, the outliers, the innovators, the doers, and those who dare to dream and act on their dreams. If you're a dropout, an opt-out, if you're thinking about doing one of those things, if you're a parent, even if you aren't any of those things and you graduated school, I want to invite you to join. All that matters is that you resonate with the Successful Dropout philosophy and that you enter the group with the intention to provide value to the other members and not just receive value yourself. Again, go to successfuldropout.com/group to request admission. Once you're a part of the group, introduce yourself and get involved, and I'll see you there. What is up, Successful Dropouts? Get stoked because today on the show we have Damien Foord. Damien is basically like a branding guru, and I'm so stoked that he got a hold of me and I was able to have him on the show. This guy has worked with huge, major brands that you've definitely heard of, such as LinkedIn, Adobe, Tesla, and hundreds of other brands in Silicon Valley. He lives in Silicon Valley, so he's sort of at the center of all this stuff going on. But he is essentially the expert at the intersection of business and humanity, ensuring that brands keep pace in these times of exponential change. So again, branding guru, which branding is such a fascinating subject to me. I think I'm not the best at it. I have a lot to learn, so I'm really excited to get into this conversation. And so without further ado, I will turn it over to the convo. Hey, Damien.
Yeah, there you are.
What's up, man?
How do you pronounce your name so I don't butcher it?
Kylan.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, no worries. How's it going?
Good. How you doing?
Hey, living the dream. Living the dream. I'm glad we were able to make this happen after a couple. I forget what happened last week.
Yeah,
I had something happen with one of the businesses. That's right.
Yeah. No problem. Thank you for kind of staying with it. I appreciate the opportunity and been checking out the Successful Dropouts group, and I appreciate what you're doing, putting it together. It's something I wish I had 10 years ago.
Yeah, that's really good to hear, actually. I dropped out about 10, 11 years ago as well, and it's the reason I'm building it is because it's something I wish I would have had as well.
For sure.
I'm definitely really proud of everybody in that group. It's a pretty small group. I mean, still growing, but still small for what I feel like most Facebook groups are. But the engagement is just off the charts compared to other groups, and I love that about our community, and it's been fun. We're gonna take it to the next level here soon.
Well, if you got engagement and you have kind of a clear kind of unifying theme, those are the things I probably look at as whether or not a group like that's going to be successful. So,
this is good. So So when we get into it, I'm gonna ask you some questions. Maybe we'll talk about Successful Dropout a bit, and I can I do this sometimes. I have some guests on the show, and then I get like sort of free consultations out of it. So.
For sure, no, I love it. It's great.
What was it? I had a digital marketer on the other week or something, Seth Himes, and so I was asking him for like tips and tricks to like get more likes on our page and all this stuff. So.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So are you in California then, I gather? Silicon Valley? Or?
Right, yeah.
Man, that must be quite the place to live, I would imagine.
It's insane.
How long have you been there?
I grew up here, and then I left. I couldn't wait to leave, actually, but I left when I was 20, and I was in the Air Force for 6 years, and by the time I came back, I couldn't wait to come back. So a whole lot kind of happened in between there. But yeah, being here and growing up here and seeing what it was, through the 90s and early 2000s, and then where it's boomed to now. I mean, it was crazy, 15 years ago. It's 100 times crazier now. So I bet. It's a pretty crazy place to live. But
so why did you want to get out in the first place?
Well, man, that's a complex question. Probably the answer I always gave is like I just hated California politics, and I hated like I actually hate the sunshine. It drives me crazy. The weather drove me nuts.
Who hates the sunshine, man?
Yeah, I know.
Wait, so do you like, what's the alternative then? I mean, do you like rain or storms or snow or just
I love
clouds?
Thunderstorms. And while I was in Oklahoma, actually, Oklahoma has crazy thunderstorms about like 9 months out of the year. Oh, yeah. And so I loved that. It was great. And people were like, you'll get sick of it. But I didn't really. I did have the realization that like, it's not normal to just pick up and be able to go to the beach or like the mountains or whatever at any moment, right? There's like in Oklahoma, there's maybe 2 weeks out of the year that you can do that. And so, there's not a big window. And so I definitely missed that and was excited to come back. Also, like people being an entrepreneur out in Oklahoma, like, oh my God, I was not finding the right people or something. I even went to the like SCORE chapter there, and they were like, what, you want to start a farm? I'm like, no, like, it was
what
crazy.
Else would you be doing in Oklahoma?
This is the SCORE chapter, I was like, no, let's like do something that changes the world. And everybody looked at me like I was a nutcase. So definitely like, I was happy to come back to Silicon Valley where that's a little more welcomed.
All right. No, I'm definitely with you, man. Like I wouldn't say like I dislike the sunshine, but I really, really do love winter and the rain because I just love cold weather in general. I was born in the North. I'm like starting to sound like Game of Thrones here, but like if I was on Game of Thrones, like I would want to be a Stark.
For
like,
sure.
That's how much I love the North and the cold and stuff. And of course, we live over here next to, like an hour and a half away from Seattle now. Up in the mountains, and so it's like been raining for like 7 days straight, and then it snowed a little, and I get stoked for snow because I do a ton of snowboarding and like winter sports stuff, and so I'm kind of with you. Like I don't think I could live next to the beach, like sunny California or Costa Rica. Some of my friends go there all the time. Right, I don't know if I could do it. It just doesn't appeal to me. Like I'd rather be in a cabin in the mountains in like a snowstorm. So I think we can definitely relate there, man.
For sure.
Well, if you haven't already gathered, I think we'll just start the.
Sure.
I'd love to keep the rest of this conversation in. We'll just start the interview from here, and I'll kind of do your intro later and put that in a little bit later. But I was noticing in your intro though that you call yourself the modern day Don Draper, and but I will add without the misogyny and without the alcoholism,
right?
And I'd be curious to hear about that because I started watching Mad Men like like last year or something, we got through like a season and just kind of dropped it. And then my wife and I, who I'm talking about, we just started watching it like last week a bit. And it's still like, it's not the most exciting TV show, but we still it's just still really interesting to watch for some reason. I love, advertising is kind of a fun subject and branding and stuff. So you are the branding expert. Tell me a little bit about that and like what you do, I guess, kind of on a daily basis.
So it's funny, the modern day Don Draper thing started as a joke, and it got so much like polarizing feedback from it that that I kind of like kept it just to I don't know, put it in people's faces a little bit, I think, but which tells you almost everything you need to know about me. But it originally happened. I had an office next door to this PR agency, and we were chatting one day about, what I do. And she was like, "Oh, you're Silicon Valley's madman of brand." And I was like, "Oh man, that's awesome."
I loved
the sound of it. Don Draper, it's so funny. Like, of the people who have seen the show, which isn't everybody to begin with, some people really hate this guy, which is just like not my experience of the show at all. Like, I ate up every bit of it. My whole life has been starting professional service firms around design, advertising, marketing, brand.
Oh man.
And so like
that was right down your alley then.
Oh yeah, and these are the godfathers of it. You know what I mean? This is like watching The Godfather for me. This is amazing. And they did a brilliant job of it. And so I am
do you know, really quick, not to interrupt, but is it based on like a real story? Are those characters like based on actual people that existed, or do you know?
Yeah, so it's based on kind of it's an amalgamation of a few people who were alive during the time, but probably my favorite is David Ogilvy, and I quote him a lot, and he's part of the influence for the role, and they talk about him in it. So like I loved the show, and I made kind of my closest group of kind of professional cohort. Like I make all of them like binge watch the whole thing. Like it'll help you understand what we're doing here. But a big part of it for me, like what I see in Don Draper, why I would want to say like I'm the modern day version of him, is he was really good at just getting to people, right? And just like the more you watch it, sure, there's all kinds of crazy stuff he's doing after hours that like you wouldn't want to idolize, but the way he is professionally, his professional skill, like I've always been that guy that walked in and it was like, look, this is what I do and it's great, and either you get that or you don't and you can leave. And it was like, definitely it's been good at times, and it's definitely hurt me at times. Drove business partners crazy. But that's just, I'm a purist of my craft, and that's very different than somebody who's, A/B testing their way to kind of hack their way in the door somewhere, which isn't bad either, right? It's just a different approach. And I'm definitely more the other side of that.
Okay. So Air Force to this, how did that work? Like, did you do any branding design stuff in the Air Force? Was it just something you were doing because you didn't know what else to do with your life? Or I was in the Navy for a while, so that's why I asked.
Oh, that's awesome. I didn't know that. So no and yes. Officially no. How I ended up in the Air Force is really interesting, right? Like I had dropped out. I was like full of hubris and spitfire, and was like attacking my dreams, and then I just made some bad decisions, right? Which, I was like 19 at the time and didn't know what the heck I was doing running a business. So
well, are we talking bad decisions in like business, or did you go pregnant, or
no, it was just I had, as it turns out, managing your finances is important, and and I didn't do that with my first business. And, it still baffles some people, but anybody who's like run a business or two, like, look, I just wasn't paying attention at all. So it was coming in and we were spending it, and it was coming in and we were spending it. And it just ended up in this magic intersection where we had gotten a bunch of money, and that money went out. Actually, the bank took a bunch of it right at a really inopportune time, and we ran out of product. And so we had no product and no money. And this was, I was 19, and everybody thought I was nuts for dropping out anyway. And so, nobody was like, oh, you mean your business is failing because you don't know how to manage money? Here, let me give you some money and save you. Like, that was not happening. And I asked everyone I knew, I begged. People very close to me were like, man, I'd love to help you, but no. And, there was like nothing left to do. I probably spent like 3 days crying about it. And then I just drew a circle on the map of the people who were closest who didn't get product and started knocking on doors and telling them like, hey, like, I'm sorry, we don't have the product and we don't have your money. Which was like, it was not a good call to make. It was really interesting, actually, just the way people reacted in us not having the product. Like, they were like, oh man, it happens, like, I get it. But then when we said like, oh, I don't have your money, that did not go over well. And people who seemed pretty supportive like switched almost right away. So anyway, like, when that happened, then like reality hit like a ton of bricks. All of a sudden, like, oh, all that hubris and everything I was riding on was right out the window. And I started applying for jobs. I think that summer I applied for like 600 jobs. And all anyone saw was I was this dropout. So I was like, I worked as a day laborer for a while, and it was just like things got really ugly. And I looked at it and was like, man, I'm going to find a job that I can't quit. I'm going to take a job that is going to like beat this disease of entrepreneurism out of me. And so I joined the Air Force. And of course, like any good entrepreneur, 6 months into joining the Air Force, then I was like, oh, I should start a business. The dust had settled and clients started calling me again, and I didn't know how to say no like any good entrepreneur. And so that kind of spun off into the next adventure. But while I was in the Air Force, I was always doing it on the side. And then like my unit found out, and so I'd like do some stuff. I did a few like promotional videos and stuff like that for the Air Force in my free time. And everywhere I went, people wanted me designing unit coins and T-shirts, and I painted a bunch of murals all over Iraq. And but that was always like my job was actually law enforcement. And so I was doing like interrogations and human intelligence collection, like totally side the spectrum. And then in my free time, doing this stuff. And so, it was definitely like born out of like a really desperate move, and then ended up creating this like unholy marriage of the two. And it was like really that. You're like
this MP interrogator with an eye for design. You're like, where did you hide the body? But hey, I could make you a great T-shirt.
Those are great shoes.
Those are great shoes.
No, for sure. It was really interesting, and it led to a lot of interesting conversations, especially I had like, I don't want to go on and on about it, but in Iraq, I had some really interesting interactions with Iraqis who like saw me and saw the uniform, and then it was like one way or another, something would happen where it's like revealed that I painted this mural, and like this guy ends up actually, he was a painter before all this stuff started. And we're like talking about different techniques, and it was like a very surreal experience,
Right on. Okay. So Air Force, how long were you in the Air Force then?
6 years.
Total.
Yeah.
6 years. Okay. Mm-hmm. So yeah, good long time. And then now you'd mentioned you dropped out. If you could, it'd be interesting to just hear like your reasonings behind dropping out. Was it just because you'd started this this business that kind of went financially downhill, or?
Yeah. So there's a couple of different reasons. I think on the surface, I felt like I'm a badass and I don't need school. Which
don't we all?
I think underneath, I kind of felt really rejected by school. School never worked for me. I think I had like A's and B's in like second grade, and then third grade I had like solid C's, and I remember there was like a deep breath in the family, like, oh no. and then fourth grade, I remember I got my first D, and then it was like fifth grade, it was like every other week, parent-teacher conferences, getting in trouble all the time. Sixth grade, they thought I wasn't going to keep it together. Seventh grade, I got expelled. So it was like, school just did not work for me, and I was smart and I was bored and I had a lot of crazy stuff going on at home. And so I wasn't like totally mentally, emotionally prepared to sit in a seat for 8 hours and have somebody drone on about stuff that they barely understood, right? Or cared about.
Yeah.
And so like I was always kind of itching and ready to like blow that popsicle stand, like I was just ready to be done already. And so I kind of like got bounced around, got asked to leave a few different schools. And it was, my senior year of high school. I had my brothers are all 9, 10, and 11 years older than me. And so this is like, I was in high school right through the big first kind of .com boom. And my brothers, they were all in their 20s during that. So they were a part of new businesses and had friends with startups and all this stuff. And of course, I'm growing up in Silicon Valley. So
yeah, seriously.
Luck of the draw, stuff was going on. And they'd say like, oh, hey, like I've got a little brother who can do that, on the cheap. And so I got a lot of business kind of through that. And so that started at 13. So by the time I was 16, 17, and really considering dropping out, it was like I'd been working really consistently since I was 13. And so it was like more and more school was just like, what am I doing here? It's not serving me. They don't like me. They don't want me here. I don't want to be here. And so I felt really strongly that, school works for some people, and it's made for one size fits all, right? And
Yep.
As a byproduct of that, some people are going to fall through the cracks, and I was more than happy to be one of them. And and just decided, what, like I'm going to go and do this my own way.
Yeah, dude. I mean, it's already clear you're too creative. You like building too much. You're too ambitious for school. Like people like that, people like yourself, people like a lot of you listening. Just we don't fit very well in that school environment. You mentioned getting your first D. I remember getting my first F. It was right. It was I failed home ec. And it was because I didn't turn in some stupid paper. Like I swear to this day that I did, and the TA or whatever just didn't. It just got lost or shuffled up in some paper somewhere. But it was like right before graduation, I got these grades, and I saw I was getting an F. And they were like, "Well, if you redo this paper, then we can give you, like a C. Like, yeah, you can graduate without an F on your record." And I just remember not caring like at all, because even my senior year of high school, I knew that these numbers, these grades, all this stuff it's going to have zero effect on my life. I was basically just there for the experience and to make friends, and I made some lifelong friends there. But I was like always skipping class to go snowboarding and do all this stuff. So I got that F, and it was almost like I had one paper I could have turned in and just not had an F on my record. I had a decent like GPA too, but it was almost like my last opportunity to just be like, F you to the school system, and just like I don't care, and you don't have an impact on my life. And so I left it, and I graduated. I didn't even get my actual high school diploma, like the paper, because I forgot to return a book to the school. So to this day, I like walk down the aisle, but I don't actually have a high school diploma. So take that, Mrs. Johnson. I guess she's my home ec teacher. My high school story, I was in class every day. I enjoy learning a lot. And so when I'm learning, I wasn't a problem. The problem is when I wasn't learning, what to do with me.
And, my junior year, I think, was really key. And like, my dad had a parent teacher conference, and I was like really used to him at this point. And, my dad asked to see all my test scores across all my classes. And it was like all my classes, there wasn't a test in there that was lower than a 90%. But my GPA was like 0.4. It was like, we didn't even realize like it could go that low. This is what he's doing. And they were like, he's just wasting his time and da-da-da. And my dad was like, look, at what point when this kid is like getting the highest scores in the class and has the lowest GPA in the school, like at what point does that say something about you?
Yeah.
And it's just,
right.
the system just is not meant. It's not realistic that it could take care of everybody, right? We need like kind of an array of options if we have any hope of educating people adequately. But it was just like, at the end of the day, like I was learning everything I needed to learn in my off time, and when I needed to learn something, I went out and found answers. So
yeah, right, yeah, that's the key right there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, right on, man. I mean, I genuinely believe that there are some people that for whatever reason or whatever situation they're in, this regular schooling and college is a great option for them, and they'll thrive in that environment. But I also believe that a lot more people than you and I even think are not meant for that environment and are just stifled, and most of them don't even realize it because it's all they know. They don't realize that their creativity is being stifled, that their ambition is being stifled, that they could do so much more than say high school or college. And so for people listening, that's the entire reason behind this show, is to like reach those people, sort of wake them up, open their eyes so they can maybe step off the conveyor belt for a second and be like, wait, I am capable of like 10, 20, 100,000 times more than what I'm doing right now. And this is not a great environment to be in order to be the absolute best version of myself.
And that right there is exactly why I love what you're doing, both with the podcast and the Facebook group, is because like school is great for some people. Don't get me wrong. Like I'm very happy
Absolutely.
My accountant went to school, right? Like I'm very happy my doctor went to school. Like people need to build bridges. You probably shouldn't wing that, right? Like cool, but the problem isn't that like school is automatically shit, right? Or terrible. I don't know. The problem is in the belief that school is for everyone. And somehow, like, especially here in the United States, like we have this view that if you didn't go to school, like, oh, you're pumping gas, you should go be changing my oil. And it's like, no, like, especially I work with design students all the time, right? I used to go to portfolio shows a lot in order to try to recruit new talent. But what I found is I can't recruit any of these people. They're not ready. And so I ended up mentoring. And so I'm involved in a couple of different colleges around Silicon Valley as a mentor to help them understand, like, look, you are not ready for real life because design, art, even creativity, like, is not something our school system does well.
Right,
so I'm
absolutely.
sorry to break it to you, but you just paid 60 to 100 grand to get something that, like, you would have been better off spending every day just pushing pixels by yourself in front of your computer. You know what I mean? Spend no money. And that's exactly what I did, right? Like, I knew my game. Like, I looked at who I was competing against, and it was like, I got to get my game up. So I just started pushing work out and getting as much feedback as possible, as often as possible. And I mean, I talk to design students now and they're like, oh yeah, well, like they do like one thing a week. And I'm like, look, I'm telling you, I was doing 5 finished works a day. And that's the only way. Like, I mean, do you want to get there in a month or in a year or in 5 years, right? Like, just push it out. And so for me, it was like the goal's right there. But going and reading books and writing an essay about, like, why this line curve makes sense, like, that's just not the way to be successful in the design industry, for sure. So I think, like, design is one that I'm end up being really involved in. But I think there's a lot of areas where it's just like school just isn't the best way to learn this, and there's certainly nothing wrong with doing stuff that's not being a doctor, an engineer, or an accountant, or something of that nature, right?
Whew, man, yeah, I got to cool off from that one. Preach it, man.
Excuse me, sorry. Yeah, but like I was saying, like that's why I love this podcast and the Facebook group, right? Is because when I dropped out, there was no one. There was not one person who was like, you know what, you'll be all right. It's just a different path. Like, no, everybody was like, oh shit, like this is going to be a rough ride for you. And I mean, in some ways it was, but in a lot of ways it's a rough ride for people who go to school. Like that's just life and figuring it out, right? And so like, if nothing else, people need a network and a group that says like, hey, oh, you've identified this doesn't work for you. That's all right. There's other ways to do it. And here's, some of the lessons that I learned along the way. Like manage your finances. It would have been great if someone would have just said that.
Yeah, right.
Like, it would have been very helpful.
They don't teach that in school.
No, they don't. Ironically enough, right?
Oh yeah, man. That all that is such good stuff. It's funny because that you mentioned, you might be pumping gas or something like that. We've had another guest on the show, Dallas Swain, and he pumps gas for a living, making $6,000 a year. Or I mean, sorry, six figures a year. Now that's granted, he's pumping natural gas out of the earth, but those blue collar jobs, don't ignore those either, because you can make some great money. He had one of the most popular episodes on the podcast, and he's a high school dropout, and the guy was spouting off chemical formulas and all this stuff he worked in like a smelting, like metal smelting factory for a while, and like his knowledge is so great because he like lived through this. Like instead of just studying chemistry in high school or college, like he had to do chemistry for his job, or like he cost clients hundreds of thousands of dollars, and so he's spouting off all these chemical formulas and stuff. And it's just amazing when you learn in sort of the context of doing something or building a career like he did, a blue collar career, and it's just doing really well. So.
No, yeah, you have to stop and ask, like, what is wrong with our society when you look down on somebody who builds a house, who pumps natural gas out of the ground, who does all these things that we absolutely need in order for this society to run, and we glorify this idea of spending six figures to get a piece of paper that ultimately doesn't even end up mattering. So I dropped out. Okay, my sister, though, she went to an Ivy League school, right? She ends up with six figures of debt and comes out and has a horrible time trying to get a job, and ends up like, hustling to try to get whatever she can get. And I can tell you, like, it was not about her. She's super smart, and it was just, did she fit a need for somebody? That's it.
Right.
And it was just like, and that paper doesn't guarantee that you do.
No, I mean, speaking as an employer myself, I could care less where you went to school. It's all about results. Are you gonna help our business grow? Are you gonna get me more customers, make me more money, create a better culture? Those are all the things that matter. And so I could care less. But people like Dallas and some of these other people that are making some great money in blue collar work might not want to hear us advocating for heading that direction, because so many people look down on it. The skills are so scarce. That's why they get paid so much.
For sure.
Yeah. Oh shoot, man. Yeah, it's all so good, and this is stuff that people I know have been listening to the podcast for a while. I've heard just over and over again. I mean, my personal story. I was lucky enough to drop out of college before I went into any sort of debt. I just was paying for the classes all myself up until I dropped out. But my wife, and people have heard this story before, my wife went into a significant amount of debt earning her degree, and now she runs two businesses and did not use her degree at all to do what she loves doing, which is health coaching, and she runs a yoga studio and a juice bar. And she got her degree in health and wellness, and we're still paying off this worthless piece of paper. And she did everything that we have today. It was built without that. We didn't even, I mean, I don't even think she has it on her website or resume or anything. It just, but we were young and naive. We didn't know any better. Anyways, I do kind of want to move on from the school discussion, education discussion, because we get a lot of that. You are the you are the expert, as your bio says, at the intersection of business and humanity, ensuring that brands keep pace in times of exponential change. Now, this is something not just businesses, I think, struggle with, but like individuals as well. And I guess you could call them businesses too, like sole proprietors, more like personal brands as well. I feel like that's such a slippery, like evasive thing to nail that intersection with branding between, business and humanity, and sort of the business reaching people where they're at. And so I want to talk about branding for a bit. And maybe we can start with like the basics. Why is branding important? Like, why should people be paying attention to their branding in their business, or maybe for their personal brand, like their sole proprietorship?
Oh man, this is like, I'd love to hear questions like that, because it's shocking to me how often you still need to convince people that like brand is where it's at, because people, Simon Sinek wrote a great book, Start with Why. Yeah. I like Simon Sinek, sometimes I don't. But this book is just undeniable. It's a great book, and in it he does such a good job of explaining what I was arguing with clients over for like 10 years before that book came out. That we don't make decisions with our head. We don't make logical choices. It's just not the way we work. By and far, on the vast majority of the decisions that we make these decisions highly emotionally. And so, if you think that you can create a business and ignore the fact that you're dealing with a human on the other side, like I can probably name like real fast the different places where your business is suffering. And you're still convincing yourself that it has nothing to do with brand, or why would I read Socrates or philosophy? What does that have to do with business? Like, it's everything. You know what I mean? Because if you want somebody to buy something, like, know about who they are, right? And not them, like, what, like, champagne they like, right? Like, know right. Who they are, what drives them, what motivates them, right? And those are the things that are determining the decisions we're making. And so brand is really all about understanding the people factors in this equation, right? The emotional, psychological, sociological factors that are acting on the business. And people are like, hold on, like how is that brand? Which is like a whole other, like I could go on for an hour about people's idea of brand is totally wrong, right? But like we are interacting as humans, and brand, I want to shift everybody's mindset right now. You will get a lot farther if you start adopting the mindset now that your brand is not a name or a logo or a color scheme. Like your brand is who your business is as a person.
Ooh,
right?
That's good.
And really successful businesses are getting this all day. And those are, I mean, that's why I've worked with a lot of them, is I come and I spout this stuff off and they're like, come here, like we need to talk about something real quick. Like I'm telling you, the big boys in the industry have this nailed. And they're just not talking about it that much and laughing at all the people who are like, oh man, but like, do I like this logo? It's like, you're way off base, right? Forget about whether or not you like it. Tell me, what does it tell me about you? Vulnerably, really tell me about you. And what does that logo tell me about your audience, right? And that's like the type of questions people need to be asking. And if you like are working with somebody who's talking to you about brand in any capacity and they aren't like an avid lover of philosophy, then run, right? Like this person has no idea what they're doing. I was just talking to somebody, and I hear this garbage all the time. On Twitter, somebody put out like, brand is not what you say about yourself. Brand is what your audience says about you. It's like, no, what? Like, that's ridiculous. Like, okay, if you're losing, and if you're planning on losing, then sure, believe that. But the truth is, brand is what I can make my audience think and say about me and think it's their own idea.
Oh, snap. That's so deep.
And that's what this stuff is all about. And I'm telling you, like, a lot of this, like I said, I had some of these ideas before, but then I went and saw the way the military is using really, like, avant-garde, creative, philosophical stuff and integrating it into the way we get information out of people. And the problem with that is, like, once I get that information from them, like, I have to trust that it's for a good reason. And I have to trust that whatever they're going to do with that information is for the greater good. And those are all things that weigh heavily on one's conscience, right?
Yeah.
And so I didn't want to do this against people anymore. Like, now I like very much the idea that we can use these same principles to find something really true about yourself that you didn't even know, right? The things that attract people to our company, and I mean really, like, the viral coefficient within a company, is whether or not is what's connecting people to you ultimately. I don't think you're going to find a successful business that really blew up, that at the middle of it is a guy like, people, take him or leave him. He's kind of boring. Like, there's always this element of you. And that's true in big businesses and true in small businesses, right? The reason why people keep going back to the same donut shop is they like the candor of the guy behind the counter.
Yeah.
And so it's like, the better you know yourself and the way that acts upon your business, the way that is subconsciously drawing certain people and repelling others, like, this is happening whether you're conscious of it or not. And so the best idea is get real conscious of it and actually set a plan and a strategy to do it intentionally. And in particular, the way I do it and my team does it, it's, I refuse to do something that I feel like is amoral. So I won't use any of these tactics to just manipulate people to getting in the door. And like, personally, I'm kind of against that. My entrepreneur side is like, I'll take people's money.
Just make the sale.
Right. But in the end, I think it's a really short-sighted sale. So even beyond my own moral compass, right, it's just bad business. Like, if I go and I help you manipulate someone to come in the door and they get there and then it's not really what we promised them on,
right,
then it's like they just leave, right? Companies like Comcast have all kinds of tricks to make you stay in the funnel, right? Everybody hates them.
Comcast, that's such a great example.
For sure. And so, I'm just resolved in my life. I'm not building any more Comcasts. We have enough of them. I've had Fortune 10 companies come to us and say, like, here's the type of thing we want you to do. You're going to create this type of campaign. And we said no, to big seven-figure contracts where it was just like, you know what? That money sounds delicious. But also, I think this fundamentally changes who we are as a business, right? So I got to eat my own dog food and not do things that are counter to who we are as a business and what's attracting certain people and repelling others.
Yeah. Well, I really respect that, man. I think ultimately, even though you might have to turn down a few contracts here and there, which you're probably already seeing the results of, just still establishing yourself in the industry as a company with actually some integrity, and in the long run, that'll inevitably come back to you. I'd be willing to bet you. I would be curious, after you've sort of talked about the importance of branding and this intersection of sort of branding, or this marriage between sort of branding and philosophy. What companies do you think are doing it right then? Just to give us some context on, like, what companies are doing it right, maybe, and which are doing it wrong. A few that come to my mind, well, one, I guess, specifically that comes to my mind, besides the one that he talks about, like Simon talks about in Start With Why, like Harley Davidson, stuff like that. But like Yeti coolers. Yeah. I feel like they're geniuses with branding, but I don't know. What are some others?
Oh, man, this is always so hard. But it's like, asking Ben and Jerry their favorite ice cream flavor, like this is what I do all day, and there's so many different angles I can come at that from. A big one that I think is not talked about enough, I think, is LinkedIn, right? And LinkedIn, a lot of people just aren't that aware of the brand, other than like, I go on the platform, I use it, like,
right.
But LinkedIn is employing their brand in a lot of really, really interesting ways, and they're like totally dead on in like defining their own identity as a company, and then being like damn near religious about, we're going to protect this at all costs. And they do it, externally, there's not a lot that they have to do, but man, they really invest and spend a lot of energy doing it internally. And I personally have not yet met anybody yet who worked at LinkedIn and hated it. Almost everyone I know who's ever worked there, like, has this like pure joy for their time there. I had an amazing opportunity to sit down with the CEO, Jeff Weiner, and he's an amazing guy. And he understands that in order for them to do big things, these like lofty kind of social, cultural goals, with this brand, like, he has to live it first. And if he's not going to live it, if he's not going to live it, then all of it's going to be garbage, right? We're all used to companies like saying these big, lofty, cool, like, things, right? But how much do they really live it? Most of it's just PR, right? I'll never forget, like, the day after the BP oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, right? Like I'm sitting there watching the news about it, and like a commercial comes on, and it's like a blue heron flying in slow motion over the grasslands, and it's BP saying like, we care about the environment. And it's like,
God.
Oh my God, like, it's such garbage, right? Like, let's get away from that. There's actually like a little known story that the PR guy right after that, right after it happened, came out and was like, hey, you know what? Like, this is terrible, but also like this happens, and this is the cost of getting gas as cheap as we get it. And I was like, holy crap. Like, I can't believe he just said that. And sure enough, he was fired. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I mean, if that doesn't tell you everything about the like state of brand right now, and so I can tell you BP is not one of my companies that I think is doing it. But like, you have to, it can't just be words on a screen or on a page anymore. Like, you have to get out there and live it. And in my opinion, LinkedIn is doing the best job of actually getting out there, being very conscious of who is it that we want to be as people. And that's going to end up creating who we want to be as a company. And to do it in such a big company is like not a small task. Seriously. So that's kind of like my high-minded one. I think Nike is a really well-trodden example. But as cliche as it is, the deeper you go into how seriously they take crafting every single message, they do it beautifully. And like, I don't necessarily agree with everything that Nike does, but that's what's beautiful about it, is they know who they are. And either you get it or you don't. Right? And they're not trying to like make you think something that they're not, or they're just creating and doing their best to stay really strictly to like, this is who we are. And then you see these other companies that like, they just end up, they try to do then what LinkedIn or what Nike's doing. And it's like, well, no, because now the difference is this is all BS. You know what I mean? And so, excuse me. Nike and LinkedIn are brands that I go back to often and watch what they're doing as they progress and change. But
so it seems like I really want to start to drill down just for our listeners. I mean, I know you could probably talk on this subject for a long time. I know there's a lot.
For sure.
You've been doing this for something like 18 years or something.
18
years. Yeah. So I know there's a lot to it, but it'd be really interesting to just drill down to a couple few really key factors that people just need to keep in mind, the people listening, when they're building their brand. Because I'm totally in that group of people who's just like, yeah, your brand is all about having the most badass logo and the being consistent with your color scheme and picking a color that says, hey, I'm like, we're bold, we're doing this, or something like that. Write down 5 words and make sure all those words are incorporated into everything you do. But one of the things I've heard you mention is that it seems like one of the core principles of branding is first finding out, who you are as a team, as a company, the why behind, like, why are you doing what you're doing? Why are you building what you're building? And being really clear with that and consistent with that. And then other people who identify with that why are going to sort of come on board. And we see that, happen with Apple, with sort of their, creative think, do differently branding, way back when they started, and like Harley Davidson with just I know nothing about Harley Davidson. I don't ride motorcycles or anything, but clearly they've been really consistent with who they are and what they stand for and why they do what they do, to the point where people are getting Harley Davidson tattoos. So it seems like that's one, but I guess maybe what are some other things to keep in mind, or questions we should be asking ourselves as we're like, hey, I'm starting this new business, you're creating your Facebook page, getting your logo, your branding, and really kind of putting yourself out there into the world for the first time? Because we have a lot of people that are in the process or wanting to start their own businesses eventually.
Yeah, so I mean, I think first and foremost is stop trusting yourself. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of ways in terms of executing on your product, like maybe you should trust yourself, but certainly with your brand, do not. Because you're lying to yourself, I promise. And so this is just kind of the nature of these things. This is everybody. It's very, very difficult for us to be truly authentic with ourselves, much less anybody else, about who we are. Right? And the things you need to be authentic about are the stuff that like you're most worried about. And so when you can look at that stuff, when you can look in kind of the mirror of your business, so to speak, and say, you know what, these are actually the things that I'm really concerned about. These are the things that keep me up at night, because I know I don't know enough to do this. Yeah. Right. And so the best thing you can do is get with some people that you trust, and don't write down 5 words that mean something to you. Like, ask them how you show up for them. Interesting. Right. Like, ask those people, like, who am I to you, really? Right. And that's like kind of the best start. Another fatal flaw I see when people starting businesses is like, there's like this determination that like, we're going to get this right. And if anybody doesn't like it, then fuck them. Like, they don't get it. And it's like, okay, yes. And let's look at those things that the people who don't get it are saying. And probably one of the things that is consistently most successful with the companies that we work with is getting them to, almost everybody keeps beating people over the head with the stuff that is most obvious about their company, right? So like, I worked with this drone company. It had like all these amazing, brilliant badasses, the top of their field in like every category, all in this company, right? Yeah. And like, all they ever wanted to tell anybody is about how innovative they are. And it's like, look, somebody takes one look at your product and one look at your team and they get it. Stop talking about being innovative. But this is the thing we naturally do. This is like high 90% of every company I've ever worked with. The thing they're talking about is the thing that people already best understand about their company. Interesting. Instead, look at the areas where you're weak and plan like, okay, like, what are their objections going to be here? What are they going to be worried about us because we know we're weak in this area? And how are we going to meet that? How can we show, not just in some sales collateral, but like in everything we do as a brand, that we recognize that weakness and we're working on it? And when you do that, like, man, that can be, we see really dramatic and powerful results from that. And so, but we spend so much time subconsciously like, don't look at the bad, because if I do, I'm going to quit and give up on this stuff. But you know what? Like, have a little forgiveness for yourself. Like, you're human. If you're starting a business, you're doing something ridiculously hard with very low chance of success, and you're doing it anyway. Like, that's ballsy. That's brave.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, continue to be brave and give yourself the opportunity to look at the things you're afraid to look at and think about and talk about.
Ah, dude, I love this. There's a lot of wisdom in this. I'll definitely be probably going back and listening to this episode again, just because
Awesome.
I need this personally. I know nothing about this stuff. It just doesn't come naturally. All the things you're saying, don't do this, are the things that I find I'll do. I would be curious. I said I was going to try to get some free consultation out of this. I can totally cut this out of the podcast if it just doesn't work.
Sure.
But it would be interesting if just for the next 10 or less minutes, you've been in the Successful Dropout group, like I imagine you've at least been to the website once and kind of checked it out a little bit. We are definitely at a stage where we're working on taking it to the next level here and getting bigger and growing, and branding has been I feel like it's been kind of an issue. So, like, pretend, I'm one of your clients. I come to you. I've got this thing. It's working. Like, it works. We're growing. We have great retention, but it needs to be taken to the next level. And the branding obviously sucks. What are some of the questions you would ask me, or some of the things that you maybe have already noticed right off the bat? You'd be like, this is wrong. You need to change this. You need to do this better. This is lacking, etc. Maybe riff on that for a while.
Yeah, I noticed something with your brand that was very true of my brand at one point. Maybe it's still true. In that I had someone, I was like working with a group at Andreessen Horowitz, and I had somebody, I completely screwed up this opportunity. I was speaking in front of a group of very important people there. And I clearly fumbled the opportunity, right? And I wasn't sure what happened, right? And so I had one of my mentors there come up to me and talk to me and said, you need to stop verbally punching people in the face. And I was like, what? And she said, I recognize that that's what got you here. Right. And maybe you wouldn't have been able to get in these doors if you didn't do that. And so good on you. But recognize that you're here now. And so this person that you had to be to get here probably isn't the same person you need to be to get to the next level. And that changed my life, changed the way I did business, definitely changed the way, I lived my life myself. So with the Successful Dropouts, I think there's an element that I still feel in it of conflict. And I think a lot of the audience feels that conflict. If you listen to my first part of this podcast, right, it's like, damn the school system, right? We've all been there. Yeah. And my biggest advice, what I think is the most important thing for Successful Dropouts, is going to be, as you're growing, and it may not be today, but it's definitely, it's probably closer than you think. As you're growing, you want to shift away from the conflict, because conflict only ever brings more conflict. Okay, so you want to shift away from the conflict and start focusing more on really focus purely on how do we serve, not how are we fighting against, what are we pushing back on, right? But the more you just ignore the haters as if they aren't even a problem and just focus on I serve you. And it's not that I don't see those elements in there, right? And I think you guys are doing a great job. I just see that off the top of my head now, that would be my single, my big red flag is that's where, the pile that you guys are going to step in at some point.
No, I think you're dead on, man. And I absolutely love that. And I feel like this could apply to a lot of people listening to maybe some of the things they're starting, some of the things they're building, or some of the things they're planning to build. I started Successful Dropout knowing that if you said something controversial, you got a lot of attention, good and bad, but it kind of made a bit of a splash. So, over a year ago, I started saying things like, hey, school sucks, college is bad, like you don't need a college degree to be successful in business and in life, and you know, for more people than you think, college is absolutely worthless, you know. And,
right, yeah.
sorry about that. 1 second.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. It is hectic today. My mother-in-law is like staying in our place, and so she's like in my office, and so my computer is out on the kitchen counter. It's pretty crazy.
Oh man. Yeah, I just realized too that every time I've coughed, I've put my phone like away and coughed away, and then I just realized like, oh, I'm wearing a mic. Like, so I apologize about that. Like,
oh no, I might figure out a way to cut it out later or something. I don't know.
Great.
I mean, people love
sure.
authenticity too, but I was
that's true. Yeah.
I was saying though. I mean, that's what I like started out with, is sort of saying these controversial things. It was obviously it was just a one-man show, sort of just me on a mic talking to a couple other people like me, but also just kind of yelling stuff into the mic when I would just do episodes by myself. And we definitely got people interested and got attention that way. Now it's actually turned into a community where we have hundreds of hours and over 100 episodes of me talking to people, like amazing people like yourself, Damien, who have been there, done that. And so the people listening, they can clearly see like it's possible. People have done this before, but now there's a community and people that actually sort of believe in the why, and you know, a bit of a movement. And so I'm pleased to hear that that's kind of your really quick analysis. I know you don't know a ton about Successful Dropout, because just in the last month we've had some meetings with some key members of the team and you know, listeners of the show, and really looking to revamp and turn this into something that's not just Kyle and Ginger screaming into the mic about, you know, how sucky college is and why you shouldn't do it, but like an actual platform of people that can sort of help you in this journey. Now we've seen people that oh, hey, look, all these people on the podcast did it, and now what we're lacking is like, here's the how-to, here's sort of the coaching and the step-by-step and all the resources. We're sorely lacking there. And so I like that.
Well, I'll tell you something really important that you did right? You could have named this Fuck School.
Yeah.
Right? In which case, like, that conflict would be really hard to separate. And you'd be surprised how often I deal with stuff like that in being brought in to help rebrand a company or something like that. And you could have even named it something softer, but not as good as what you did name it. It could have been like Other Paths to Success, right? But the fact is it's Successful Dropouts, and it does two things, right? One, it makes the cohort focused on that end state, right? And so you invite people. It's almost like the alumni group for people that have no alumni group, right? So it by nature, it's something successful people want to be a part of. And two, the people who haven't gotten there yet are still in the journey. They get that eye on the prize to work towards. And so you get this dual-sided people who have, you know, kind of already to some extent made it there. Believe me, I'm like for sure still working. And then on the other hand, people who need that guidance and help. And so I think especially in a community, the key is having two sides, right? You want to be a platform. And so like, what two sides are you bringing together? And I think that's really it, right? Like people who have found some level of success and have a lot of stuff that they want to give back, and people that they see who are still trying to make it, who those kind of mentors can see a piece of themselves in them. And so now that you have this nugget of, okay, so this is our community, now it's about like, now how do we serve them? What are the things that they really need? And I suggest like now is a really good time to start doing lots of just open research and talking and to all your listeners and community members, and figuring out like, you know, what are the resources that we can help each other with. So yeah.
So you like the name?
Yeah. No, the name is good. I think it's great.
Yes. I've got the branding guy that's worked with Tesla tells me he likes the Successful Dropout name. I think I'm good. Yeah. I can retire now. I can sell this thing or something. I'm gonna have to look into that. That's great stuff, man. Well, I really appreciate you delving into that a little bit. Man, I'm writing a bunch of stuff down too as we're talking. Like, I know these podcasts are for other people, but I find myself just learning so much sometime. I'm definitely gonna have to go back and listen to this. I have a couple random questions for you. Actually, before I ask those, I want, like, so are you just, you're obviously not just a one-man show. You have sort of a team behind this. I mean, what is it exactly that you've built? We've talked about branding, but I want to hear just a little bit about what exactly you've built, yourself. This, I imagine you have like a branding agency and sort of maybe a team that helps you with some of this stuff, or, what are you doing right now, essentially?
Yeah, so this is kind of the short version of that story. Is I started in design, and then once I joined the military, I still had design clients, but I didn't have the time. And so I started outsourcing that out. And so I kind of became this like freelance creative director, basically. And that was the start of this agency. And as that grew, we started working our way into more and more strategic work. And that kind of turned into this marketing agency. And that was acquired in 2013. And I saw the way I could have taken what we were doing there and make it one step better, and started this company with a friend of mine called MTCA. And that was like purely a creative agency. And we've done a lot of amazing work. Super blessed to have like a lot of fun doing stuff, like a lot of our big stuff with LinkedIn and Tesla and Adobe, and happened in the last few years, taking this company from 0 to 1, so to speak, really, really quickly, just iterating on this idea that had been honed over my experience and my business partner's experience. In the last year, we started to realize these like competing strategic priorities, where on the one hand, we're a creative agency and we do a lot of various creative work. I mean, I'm talking about amazing video and brochure designs and business card and logo stuff, and these crazy events and the offices of LinkedIn, and like producing conferences and apparel, and I mean, it's just all over the place. Any like kind of produced creative item we created, and that was a lot of fun, and it's still doing that. It's killing it in that space. But I recognized I was kind of being pulled towards this thing deeper into the world of brand, where it's not just about creative work. It's actually about like 1,000 different touch points of your business. For brand to really be done right, like it can't just be your logo and business cards and brochures, right? It has to be like at the very top level, how you run your business. It's got to be integrated with as an indelible part of your business strategy. And so I left MTCA. I stepped down as CEO in last April. And since then, I've kind of been in stealth mode, called up some people I've worked with over the years, and we've put together this kind of black ops team. And we're building a new firm that will be focused really on bringing kind of strategic business advice from the human perspective, right? So not just what people think of as their brand or their marketing, but every place where your business interacts with a human. So your supply chain, your employees, and of course your customers, and even yourself, and how that impacts the success of your business. And so, that is, we're still building, and we're looking to launch around March. So I'll be dropping something in the successful dropouts. If people are interested in what I'm doing, I'll post something as we get closer that says more about that.
Definitely, dude. Yeah, please do. That's really exciting stuff. I'm super stoked for you, and I can't wait to hear what happens with that. I think I can gather already just from talking with you. I think it's probably going to be pretty huge. I'm curious with branding and all this stuff. Like, I guess you have been doing this for a pretty long time. 18 years is a long time, but I mean, are you primarily learning right now, learning new things and sort of, because I imagine to brand and to keep this eye on this intersection between business and humanity and stuff, like you got to keep up with what's going on in the world and what people are thinking and saying and feeling. I guess, what do you do to sort of stay current with that? Do you read any like more traditional materials like books or articles like you would in school, or does it all just come from a couple different more creative sources, or just experiential learning?
Oh man, that is the magic question. And I'm going to do everything in my power to not take an hour to answer it. So yes, it is a full-time job. Like, this space, I think, is moving extremely fast.
Yeah.
I think if there's anything moving faster than information technology right now, it's how people relate to information technology right now, right? And if you look at the World Economic Forum and what they're saying are the most desirable job skills in the next 5, 10, 15 years, it's all soft people skills. But nobody's asking why, right? It's because the way we as people are relating to business is dramatically changing, and it's changing every day. And so in order to like be any good at this at all, I have to be super on top of it, and I consume content in every way that I can. I'm watching YouTube videos all the time. I'm going to conferences. I'm reading like blog articles every day, and I read a lot of books too. And so it, like anything, you could be great at anything. It's never just like, can you? It's a matter of like, do you want to be? Yeah. Like, do you want to do what it's going to take to get there? And I really love this stuff. I love people. I'm super fascinated by people, and I love business. And so this intersection is very, very natural for me. Something really important about like, how do you learn without school, right? And that I found in one of the businesses I was in, one of my business partners was a hotshot student at Stanford. He actually dropped out. I should connect you with him.
Sure.
And he's running an awesome company right now too in the kind of crypto blockchain space.
Oh yeah, and, I'd love to talk to him then.
Yeah. He was like the head of the Stanford I think actually the founder of the Stanford Bitcoin group, and he's a really interesting dude. But in watching him, right? So I never went to school. I didn't even finish high school, right? I didn't even really go to elementary school hardly, right?
Yeah.
Like, so I didn't know anything about school. And so I didn't know the things that I was missing. And he had this approach to learning that kind of all his friends understood and got, that I thought was fascinating. And it's like these 4 pillars, right? The first is like, you need expert instruction, right? And so he was getting that from Stanford. I get that from like reading Psychology Today or reading Brand Strategy Insider, which is like, if you're interested in brand, it's an awesome online publication. Right. And so I'm reading expert, right? Like mainstream, like the research that's out there, right? Expert instruction. The next piece is a professional mentor, right? So he had somebody that bridged the gap between his instructors at school and somebody who's actually doing it out in real life, that helped him understand like the difference between the two. So I can read stuff in Psychology Today, but I also need to like be saying like, okay, great, but how does that actually apply to business, right? The third is peer study, right? So you need to have a group of people that common interest, that you come together and act as a sounding board for each other and share ideas, and meetup groups are really great for that. And then the fourth being individualized learning. And so spending really time studying the way that you want to study, about the things that you want to study. And even if that seems outside of the realm of whatever it is you're trying to educate yourself on, that's where that intersectionality, the cross-pollination of ideas comes from, is when you're within this context, you're bringing in these other sources that you're interested in and you want to apply them. So that is something that, I kind of figured out in 2013, and I've been really, really religious about going down my list and saying, am I filling each one of these roles right now? Because I think almost any entrepreneur, like you have to stay on top of your craft.
Totally.
And this stuff is changing all the time. One last thing I'll say on that same topic is just that when technology and people and life is changing as rapidly as it is right now, the faster things change, the thing that becomes important to pay attention to is the stuff that's staying the same. And when it comes to what stays the same about brand and humanity as it relates to business, like really that's philosophy. So I started going really deep into the philosophers and saying what has stayed the same about humanity and what has a pretty good chance, if it's been true the last 10,000 years, it's probably still going to be true through this next kind of technological revolution that we're going through right now.
Oh man, we don't have time right now, but I'd love to just dive way deep into that stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, I would think one of them is probably just the search for meaning in general. People want to find meaning in life.
Oh yeah, that's one of our biggest drivers, And so when you know these things, right, you as a business can offer them that. This is a driver that they don't even know how to say no to, right? People thousands of years ago didn't know how to say no to this. We still haven't figured it out. And so when you can offer people meaning, guess what? They're going to work for you harder at a lower cost, and they're going to be happy to do it.
Yeah.
Right? Or when you can provide them a service that gives them that meaning, they're going to pay more for it, and they're going to love you for it, right? That is the way to win. Not like, oh, let me trick you into buying this thing and then hang up on you when you try to call customer service. That's just not going to work, right? The key is finding these ultimate human drivers, and then how can you tap into that and provide that to your customers?
Oh, I love that so much, dude. And the 4 pillars, that's great: expert instruction, professional mentor, peer study, and then individualized learning. The expert instruction, you can get that for people listening. I just want to go through these really quick. You can definitely get that anywhere from reading books, from a number of different websites that can pretty much teach you anything you want to do, starting with Google. But you've got Udemy, and then lynda.com and Code Academy, other websites like that. Professional mentor, people think that's a barrier a lot of the times. You have to hire this $20,000 a month, mentor. You have to hire Mark Cuban. I think it's a lot simpler than people think, and we've talked about this on the show before. Say if you want to be mentored by somebody like, say, Gary Vaynerchuk, read his stuff. The guy has so much stuff out there: podcasts, interviews, Facebook videos, YouTube videos, books, you name it. It's all out there, and he's saying all the same stuff that he would say to you anyways if you were paying him. And chances are he's got so much material out there that you can find something that meets you where you're at. So you can have a mentor without talking with them one-on-one for an hour a week, paying him $10,000. Just find somebody who's already where you want to be and already doing it in the real world, and follow their stuff. Also, don't be afraid to reach out to them either. Peer study, go for it.
Real quick to that point, first of all, thank you for saying that, because that's so true, and it's more important to do that than it is to sit around and be like, oh, I can't find a mentor.
Yeah.
Also, I'll tell you right now, one of my mentors, I've got a couple that I value very highly, and they're great because I get to go to them and ask them questions, and they solve these huge hurdles for me before I even realize I've hit them, right? Mm-hmm. And one of my most prized one, he does charge $20,000 a month for it. But we ended up talking and connecting, and I was really real with him. I knew that we were highly aligned because I know myself well enough that he took me on pro bono. And so we work together because, he's able to pass on this knowledge and he gets to see it put directly into action. So if you want a mentor, the most important thing you can do is be coachable, right? Be willing to listen really well and then put it into action. And mentors really respect that. And so whether it's Gary Vaynerchuk or it's this guy who runs the store down the street who you respect and you want guidance from somebody, man, respect them enough to really listen to what they're saying and then put it into action. And you'd be surprised how many people will do it for free.
Oh, dude, I love that so much. All right, we are running out of time here, but I just got 2 more questions for you before I let you go here, and I try to ask every guest on the show these. The first one is just, what parting advice do you have for any of our listeners who are thinking of dropping out to pursue some sort of entrepreneurship or build something, but they haven't quite made that step yet? Just any parting advice.
Okay, I'm going to give you a harsh truth. It was true of me. It's true of most dropouts I know. A lot of people drop out running from something. Mm-hmm. And we're hardworking and we're badasses, and so we make a great thing out of it. But the truth is that the great things usually happen once we figure out, like, we don't need to run from something. And we can keep running, right? And that's great, right? You just don't need to run from it. And so know really the reasons why you're dropping out. Be very aware of the things you're scared of and the things that make you sad when you're alone, right? Like, be real about those things. And find a support network that helps you come to the realization that, like, you know what, I'm all right, and I'm going to go be successful. Yeah. Because that's, in my experience, that's the one thing that happens. So go ahead. If you know you feel like school's not working out for you, like, go ahead, like, go leave and figure it out for yourself. But also take the time to really know yourself while you do it.
Yeah, along those lines, I would definitely advise against I think there's a difference between, like, just dropping out and then failing out. Just quitting because you can't take it anymore is not always the best, decision, at least. Or instead of just dropping out, drop into maybe something else. And a lot of that just has to do with knowing yourself and being really introspective and being able to figure that out prior. But yeah, this attitude of I don't like it, I'm just gonna run away from it. I'm right with you. I don't think that's the healthiest way to do it. Last question here. What parting advice do you have for any of our listeners who have already dropped out and who are already on their entrepreneurial journey?
No, right now it's going to be really hard.
Yeah.
And there's going to be days, I guarantee there's going to be days where you feel like you're the biggest idiot in the world and everyone is right and you never should have done that. And that's okay. It's just par for the course, And so, like, be really kind with yourself. Learn that, like, you can be really scared or anxious or depressed or overwhelmed, and you don't have to let those feelings run your life. Mm-hmm. Right? And so, like, just give yourself the time to, like, kind of watch the, your emotions pass down the stream like little boats, but, like, you keep yourself sitting on the banks.
Yeah.
Right. And just know that, like, the emotional roller coaster is something with entrepreneurship that I don't think is even still talked about enough. Like, suicide inclination with entrepreneurs is really high, right? It's like, it's a really tough thing. And so just know, like, it's going to be tough. And there's going to be days where you feel like a moron. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. And there's going to be times where people were right, and that was a stupid move. And that's okay too. And you just keep going and recognize, like, your feelings don't need to run your life.
Yeah. Oh, dude, that's such good stuff. It's funny, though, when you do mention, I get what you mean by watch the boats pass on the stream, but all I can think about is that scene in the movie It, where the little paper boat is floating down the stream in the gutter and the clouds there. Oh, man.
I didn't given the context now, that's not such a great metaphor anymore.
Oh, gosh. All right, what's the best way that people can connect with you?
I'm super active on LinkedIn, so I love to work with people on LinkedIn. I'm more and more active in the Successful Dropouts Facebook group, and I'm a really approachable guy. So whether you find me through Facebook or through LinkedIn, I'm really happy to just connect, and I'm self-aware enough to know where I can help and what I can give and what I can't. So you might as well ask. Perfect.
Well, Successful Dropouts, you are the average of the 5 people you hang around the most, and you've been hanging out with Damien and Kylan today, learning what it takes to drop out, grind, and succeed. For everything we talked about today, head over to successfuldropout.com and type Damien into the search bar, and the show notes will pop right up. And as always, stay hungry, stay foolish.